And welcome on in to the latest edition of the Blue Horseshoe podcast. He is George Bremer. I am Ryan Hickey. We are back here after a break from the weekend. I survived the Scottsdale heat, do as much do on a bachelor party, grew a mustache, George. But the more things change, the more things stay the same. And we start today's podcast, George, with yet again, Jonathan Taylor drama. The latest from Tuesday's practice is this. Jonathan Taylor was not there. The first time he was not seen at practice, all at training camp. After practice, head coach Shane Seickett said he was just getting some treatment, and he wants to see Jonathan Taylor being able to practice before he's able to play at some point in the regular season. We have just learned, George, in recent moments, according to Ian Rappaport, tremendous NFL insider, NFL Network, that the absence for Jonathan Taylor was excused and that he's actually not at the facility whatsoever, and instead is getting treatment right now away from the team on the same ankle that he had surgery on all the way back in January, and obviously the same ankle that gave him a lot of problems in 2022. So we talked, George, in the beginning when he was put on PUP. Is he holding in? Is this more of an exaggeration to send a statement in order to get a new contract? We talked about it last week as kind of things evolve of, should we actually be concerned that this ankle injury is worse than maybe we thought going into camp? Again, 7 months removed from ankle surgery. It's supposed to be on paper about a month roughly recovery. And again, that was back on January 25th. On August 8th, George, he is now away from the team, getting more treatment on that same ankle. Is it officially time to be concerned of Jonathan Taylor's status for week number one, just from a pure injury perspective?
Yeah, oh, absolutely. I mean, if everything is to be taken at face value and he is off site right now, getting more treatment on this ankle that should have been taken care of in February, that's highly concerning. And it's highly concerning for this season. It's highly concerning for his prospects of getting paid, not just by this team, but by any team. I mean, we've talked over and over again about how bad the running back market is, and how difficult it is for running backs everywhere. If you're an injured running back, it's going to be twice as tough. So, my advice, if I was his agent right now, would be to get healthy and to get out on the field as quickly as possible, and to put the contract talk and the trade talk away, because I think the only way out of this now is to come out and prove you're healthy, show that you're the guy, that you have him, because we've seen what he can be. I mean, there's a reason he's consistently called the best offensive player on this team. It's true. He is absolutely the most important offensive weapon they have, the guy that's going to keep defenses up at night. But he's got to be healthy to do that. And it wouldn't be the first time, unfortunately, that we saw a guy play through something and make it worse. Maybe he shouldn't have been out on the field as much as he was last year. That's all going to be conjecture and parts of this too. But if it's truly the ankle, which is, at this point, that's what we have to take it for, that's highly concerning.
I would agree. And George, why I think it's time on August 8th to admit, hand up, I was wrong. Every podcast we've done so far since Jonathan Taylor has kind of staged his since Jonathan Taylor's voice will say his frustration about not getting a contract extension, which is essentially since camp started, I've been on the team, or I've been on the side of paying Jonathan Taylor was the right move, and the Colts have messed up by not doing so. I think I got to be wrong, George. I think, you know what? It's time to retire the run the damn ball hat. Big day, at least for now, because despite how they handled it, and again, handling it's a different situation, but the decision by Chris Ballard and a little bit by Jim Irsay to not pay Jonathan Taylor right now looks to be the right one. Because how can you pay a guy right now, even though he's 24 years old, but the fact that this ankle surgery, and again, by all reports, by all anecdotes, was supposed to be a month recovery. We're now going on 7.5 months removed from this ankle surgery. And there's still issues. There's still problems. There's still, obviously flare-ups where he still needs more treatment and is not healthy enough to get on the field. That is clearly a major concern about paying him and his long-term ability to stay healthy. And like you said, right now with an already devalued market, even though he is the best offensive player on this team, we know it, you know, and I know, and everyone knows it. If you're not healthy, it doesn't matter how good you are. Your best ability is availability. And if you can't trust Jonathan Taylor right now to be healthy, I don't see how giving him an extension makes any sense. And so, especially if with Jim Irsay talking about how he wants Jonathan to play in 2023, be healthy, and then they'll revisit the contract talks after the 2023 season, I can't sit here and call Jim Irsay crazy. He's 100% right. And because right now, if you can't trust Jonathan Taylor's ankle that it's fully back, or you want to see first and foremost how his body responds after the surgery, Colts are 100% right. They are 100% right, at least in terms of not giving Jonathan Taylor the contract right now, because if you can't truly believe he's healthy or want to see how his ankle responds, that's the right move right now.
No, 100%. I don't know if I'd have to see the whole year. I think I've seen enough from him in his career that I'd probably only need to see September or maybe the first part of October before I would feel comfortable if he looked right. But I definitely wouldn't want to make a deal right now. That doesn't let him off the hook for the way they've handled this. Like you said,
Right.
It's still been a circus. It's still been, far more contentious than it should be. But ultimately, yeah, there's 32 teams in the league. Not a one of them is going to play a running back with an ankle injury. That's just not going to happen. Look, through this whole thing, and I think I've been pretty consistent with this. I feel for JT. His situation is tough. The running back situation in general is tough. You've got an owner right now who's saying you're not getting an extension, but we're also not trading you. But we want you to come out here and put it all on the line, even though you are dealing with something and you coming off a year in which you were dealing with something. But we're not going to give you any guarantees beyond that. So just come out here and basically he's being asked to come out and be the 2021 version of Jonathan Taylor, and the reward might be nothing. And that's a tough sell. But that being said, it's the right sell if he's truly injured. And that's as cold as that is, that's the cold, hard business side of this. So I think, I feel for Jonathan Taylor because it's a really tough situation to be in. And B, I think everybody, including the team, just wants to see him get healthy and get back out on the field and be himself. And I think that I said a couple weeks ago, and I still think that's his best play right now, is to come out here and remind everybody why he's the best offensive player on this team, remind everybody why he's arguably the best running back in the NFL, and then put a neon flag, put a neon sign up that says, come get me. I mean, that I think that's what you do. Pay me, whoever you are, Indy or 31 other teams, look what I can do. And I hope for his sake, that's the way this plays out. But if he's out there getting treatment away from the building, there's, whose name's going to come up, and it's, I'm not going to mention it, but it brings back a lot of bad memories around here.
That it does, without a doubt. And to your point, George, of Jonathan Taylor's best option right now being get healthy and remind everyone that 2021 was not a fluke and that you're back to being that guy quickly. That's his only option, because even though he wants a trade, you just mentioned, George, it's unfair and cold, the reality of the NFL business. But just because the Colts aren't willing to pay you doesn't mean that anyone else is. Like, there's no team right now that's going to trade for you if you don't get back on the field. There's no team that's going to blindly, not seeing you practice or playing the game, going to give up assets and then most likely have to try to give you some sort of extension either immediately or after the season. No team is going to do that without trying to fully trust and be able to know you can get back to that 2021 level. So even though he wants a trade right now, he has no option but to get back on the field because his value is at zero. No team's going to trade for him right now until they know he's fully healthy, bare minimum. And so for Jonathan Taylor, like you said, the best option, his only option right now, is getting back on the field as soon as he can and showing that 2021 is still in him going forward. And he's a lot of prime years left to give, whether it's for the Colts or another team. I don't see how he's going to be able to do that without getting back in the field first and foremost, whether that's in training camp or when the regular season does come. So that's definitely...
When Chuck Pagano was here, one of his big lines was make yourself necessary. He meant the bottom of the roster guys, that they come out here and, make yourself necessary, make it impossible to cut you. And I think that's where JT is now. Go out there and make the combination of him and Anthony Richardson something that this team cannot live without.
It's fair. I think you're, in terms of getting the money, that's how you're going to do it. Again, whether it's for the Colts or another team, that's how you truly prove your worth. And you show that even though you are a running back, you still bring a lot of value and you still deserve to get paid like a very highly compensated offensive player, despite the fact the position you play, again, is right now being devalued. But what I'm very concerned about as well, George, is the fact that not only is he still rehabbing an ankle injury, but now he's rehabbing an ankle injury away from the team. Like, up until this point, we've seen Jonathan Taylor at practice. Now, obviously he's not practicing, but he's at least there with the team. And I'm going to assume, tell me if I'm wrong or this assumption's out of bounds, that even though he's not practicing, that ankle injury obviously was giving him some sort of issues, that he was rehabbing it, at least here at Grand Park with Colts trainers. I'm assuming he's not just walking up to practice, going to meetings and going home without getting any sort of work done on the ankle. I'm assuming before practice, after practice, whenever he is getting some sort of rehab done with the Colts at the facility, and then obviously tracking his progress. The fact that now he's, and according to Ian Rappaport, having an excused absence, so the Colts are approving of this, going away from the team, whether it's back home, whether it's somewhere else, wherever his personal trainer is, or seeing, second opinion from some sort of specialist, that to me is even more concerning right now, that he feels that it's not progressing the way he wants, or that it's getting worse, that he has to leave the team and go somewhere else. His obviously status of week one is in major doubt, but it's also just a major concern for 2023 that we could be kind of reliving the Shaq Leonard 2022 season debacle, albeit a different injury, but basically reliving that all over again this year, where he's never truly healthy and never able to kind of find out the right cause of what's given him issues.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen that a couple times around here. You saw it with Andrew Luck. You've seen it now with Shaq Leonard, and there's too many echoes of that here, and that's that's unfortunate, and we'll see. If he's not rehabbing the injury, then what else would he be doing? Away from the team, and why else would it be excused? And if it is this injury, as the reports are right now, it's highly concerning, and you do have serious, doubts about week one and about anything beyond week one. But the other part of that is we don't know what it is. Maybe he's going for a checkup to get a second opinion to say that he's ready to go. I don't know. It could be, we don't know what point in the process it is, but just the fact that they're doing anything, even a second opinion to get you cleared right now, is a highly concerning thing for an injury that should have been, behind you in February.
Without a doubt. Was there any concern today from Shane Steichen after practice about Jonathan Taylor not being there? I mean, Shane Steichen's not giving a lot of details necessarily, but nothing.
He's saying nothing. And, he said, that the hope is that when he's ready, that he'll be able to go. And he hopes to see him out here before camp ends, but, it's all a health thing. So, but, he didn't mention the off-campus treatment or any of that element either. So, no details there from the team today, at least.
When he says camp ends, training camp ends a week from Thursday, like at least at Grand Park. Is he talking about next Thursday, or is this like basically before all of training camp ends, which is basically the week before the week one game is against the Jaguars? So basically Labor Day weekend.
I mean, we're still interpreting Shane a lot because it's still early days with him, but most of the coaches that I've been around with, when they talk about camp ending, they mean the end of the preseason. They mean that the week before the regular season starts. So I assume that, unless he clarifies that's what he means. Most of them, that's because, they consider, and they're right, going back to the facility as still training camp because they're still in training camp mode. I haven't been around a coach yet that didn't treat it that way. So unless Shane clarifies, I'll assume that he's talking about the end of August.
And we know there's not a lot of details or clarification right now with Shane Steichen, at least early on, that he's not big into details and big to giving out a lot. So you're probably right. We'll assume the larger timeline of basically before week one, he hopes to get out of practice, which again, does not say much right now. Again, Jonathan Taylor away from the team, getting some sort of rehab done, excused by the Colts to check out that ankle that's given him a lot of problems. 7.5 months, George, removed from surgery back in January. Very, very concerning. This also brings us to hype or hullabaloo, because this speaks to a larger point. But I found this very interesting. So Matt Ryan was talking with The Athletic on Monday, and Matt Ryan, of course, is asked about his time with the Colts. And he said, direct quote here, I'll clean it up for the audience because this is a family-friendly show. But he was asked about his time with the Colts last year. This is Matt Ryan. Quote, I mean, it was a blank show. Blank starting with an S, if you know what I mean, a 4-letter word. It was a blank show of 18 months, basically, is the best way to describe it. Then went into talk about, the firing of Frank Reich, the hiring of Jeff Saturday. He said, quote, and then our season shakes out, which is a book all to itself. I felt like I've probably seen it all in 14 years and then realized, no, you have not. You have not seen it all. There's a lot of other things that are going to come up. It was a difficult year. There's no doubt about it, end quote. None of those quotes, George, are surprising. Right? We all witnessed last year. We all saw it play out right in front of our eyes. None of those quotes are out of bounds, unfairly characterized. And I think Matt Ryan is 100% right in everything he just said. But here's where I
Fair
want to
play.
bring in fair play. Here's where I want to bring up hyper hullabaloo and kind of talk about this now, spinning it forward, not to revisit 2022, because I think we can both kind of bury that year, hopefully for good.
Please.
Yeah, we don't need to revisit. There's enough drama in 2023 to keep us busy. We don't got to go back to the doldrums of 2022. But here's where I want to kind of spin it forward here and ask her hype or hullabaloo. Have the Colts changed that much? When Matt Ryan's calling it a bleep show last year, you look at right now, the only thing that's really changed, the head coach, which obviously could be a big impact, and the quarterback. Two massive, impactful positions to help kind of get the things going forward. But obviously, Chris Ballard's still there. Obviously, Jim Irsay is the ringleader, and we do know everything in sports and in business does start at the top. Jim Irsay is at the top of that ladder. A lot of players are still here as well from 2022. So let me ask you this, George. Hype or hullabaloo? The Colts are still a blank show going into 2023, and not much has changed from 2022 so far.
I would say to this point, hype. I mean, we talked about, the pre-training camp pod, that it's clean slate, wipe it away, start over, leave the circus in 2022 and start fresh, start anew. And that lasted like a day and a half. And then the Jonathan Taylor situation took over. And I think that alone is, and like I said, we may look back on it differently when all is said and done, because if it is an injury, then obviously you look at everything in a little bit different light. It doesn't change the way it was handled. It doesn't change the elementary school food fight on social media. It doesn't change, any of the optics around it. It just makes their stance initially more understandable. But ultimately, that to me is it feels too much like last year, and you didn't want any remnant of last year. You didn't want to whisper an echo of last year coming in. Now, it doesn't doom the Shane Steichen era. It doesn't doom the Anthony Richardson era. I mean, those guys still do have a fresh start, but there's definitely too much of 2022 still lingering around here. Maybe that's not the case in September, October. They better hope it's not. I think that's something that should be a major goal for the franchise. But where we're at right now, like you said, what has changed? I mean, that's the bottom line. What has changed?
I'm with you. It's 100% hype. And like you said, thankfully for the Colts going forward, they have the two positions change that can drastically now change our answers from hype to hullabaloo, hopefully sooner rather than later, with the head coach change and the quarterback change. But right now, George, it's not about like the frustration part for the Colts. The frustrating part about the Colts is I think they have over the last 2 years, they have made more right decisions than wrong. Meaning, I thought Matt Ryan at the time they acquired him was the right move. When they fired Frank Reich, again, at this point, I think we were both in agreement that team was lifeless, that was dead. Okay, the right move. Not paying Jonathan Taylor a contract extension before this year, George, we're seeing played out right in front of our eyes, is looking like the right move and the smart football move. The issue is how they've handled it, how they've publicly talked about it. All three of those moves have hurt and damaged a team and made them truly a laughingstock. Like they are one of right now, especially with the Commanders selling and Dan Snyder being out of the NFL, they are now one of the candidates to being one of the most dysfunctional teams in the NFL, even though, again, I think overall decision-making has been more right than wrong. But when you hire Jeff Saturday and the way that whole thing was handled, and the way Jim Irsay talked about Jeff Saturday so defiantly, so arrogantly, and that blew up right in his face. Again, firing Frank Reich, I would say at that point was the right move, and you need some sort of spark to try to save the season. Backfired because it was a total circus. Not paying Jonathan Taylor, again, is looking like the right move now with his ankle still being a problem or still not being 100% healed. But the way you handle it, you bring in RV to practice, you bring Jonathan Taylor on the bus, you're tweeting about the running back situation, you're getting in a fight with his agent, like how they publicly handled this has been all wrong and all an embarrassment, to where the fact that, again, like Matt Ryan is not wrong when he calls it a blank show. And like you said, even though Jeff Saturday is no longer there, even though you would think with a new head coach in Shane Steichen, who is very business, he's business first and business only. He doesn't give you a lot of quotes. He's not Mr. Personality. He is ball, which frankly, George, what this team needs. You draft a quarterback for the first time in over a decade, and you finally, after 5 years of Band-Aids, try to get the franchise guy at pick number 4. There's reason to be optimistic, but each time you have a reason to be optimistic, something happens, George, that again just they just totally bungle. And like you said, the two guys, or really the one guy in Jim Irsay who's done a lot of this, is still here. So right now it's 100% hype because really, even though the coach has changed, the quarterback has changed, not much else has changed, George. And that's where this team is right now. One of the laughing stocks of the league, and it's sad.
Well, and I think one of the biggest reasons we were talking about you got to get the circus out of town is for that rookie quarterback, and that's where I think there's just more pressure on Anthony Richardson's shoulders as these kind of things continue to go on, and maybe Jonathan Taylor not being out here might be less about the team and more about the injury. Although him requesting a trade is more about the team and less about the injury. But regardless of how that's played out, it hurts him. But also, just the I don't know, the optics or the implication that he has to be the guy to pull them out of this dysfunction, that he has to be the guy to lead them back to respectability. That's a lot to ask of a rookie quarterback, put on a 21-year-old's shoulders. And I don't think it's fair.
I would agree. Now, look, guys have done it. We've seen Joe Burrow with the Bengals, right? The Bengals were notoriously poorly run for a long time, and one draft pick, one guy's changed around the entire perception of an organization. So it can happen, but you're 100% right. Right now, the Colts need Anthony Richardson more than he needs them, and that's a problem. That's a situation where you are relying more on one guy rather than giving him the tools and resources to have, to help him out. You were kind of almost asking him to bail you out, and that's especially before he's even taken a professional snap. That's a big-time problem, and concerning that, again, even though he's not involved in the drama, even though, nothing negative is being said about him, it's still just the overall vortex is sucking him into it. And I think you're right. It does, in an indirect way, put more pressure on him and kind of almost ask him to be the savior. When in reality, when you drafted him, that's the last thing you need to ask him for, because you needed to help him out first before he could help you out. And it's almost like roles are reversed in the matter of a few weeks of training camp.
This is a quarterback who needs to be nurtured. Everybody said that from the get-go. He needs a good situation around him. He needs to be able to grow. He needs to make his mistakes, learn from them, improve every week. It's hard to do that, when there's a clown car circling you and there's elephants over in the ring next to you and, and trapeze artists above you. And you can't have that going on. He needs to be able to come out and grow and make his mistakes and be, we talked about it a couple times already. We thought the focal point of this summer was going to be Anthony Richardson, and he has been story 1B. But again, today we're leading with Jonathan Taylor, and it's too much to ask for a rookie. I mean, this should be a situation where you're giving him everything you can to grow and giving him the best situation. It's no different than a kid. You want that kid. It takes a village, right? You want to give them the best teachers, the best coaches, the best parents, the best food. Everything around them needs to be as good as it can possibly be so they can grow up, reach their potential. Quarterback's the same way. And right now, the Colts are being bad parents.
And just to go back to JT, because it's just you saying that kind of spurred this in my head, and it makes this whole situation even more frustrating. Just look at today, George. Jonathan Taylor is not with the team. And according to Ian Rappaport, he was not with the team yesterday. So the last 2 days, he's been excused. The Colts have approved it. He is going to get rehab. They could have easily gotten out in front of this and either put out a press release yesterday or today saying, as a heads up, JT is not here. He's getting rehab. And you could have spun it in a way that makes you seem like everything's all good here. Nothing to be concerned about. This was scheduled. This is, what we're doing. Make sure he's back ready to go week number 1. There are plenty of people on the payroll that get paid a lot of money, George, to spin things in a positive way to make it seem like you have a handle of the situation. And now when that doesn't happen, when the first time we realize Jonathan Taylor's not a practice is when you walk on the field and don't see him for the first time in training camp. When after a practice, Shane Steichen saying, yeah, he's not away from the team, he's getting rehab, and we expect him back sometime. And you have a national reporter breaking news that he's been excused from practice and now he's away from the team and away from the facility, George. The Colts numerous times, going back to the trade request as well, they constantly fail to get ahead of things. And when you don't get ahead of things, George, it's either you control the story or the story controls you. And it's frustrating that they have continually had the story control them, and they've not learned their lesson. They have not learned their lesson. They have not been honest. They have not gotten ahead of it. They have no foresight. And it's situations, again, where even today, where something, it could be very minor, George. It could be.
It could be.
But the fact is that they did not get ahead of it, and now we're learning bits and pieces of information, maybe more from Jonathan Taylor's side than the Colts side. We have to think that they are kind of losing control of the situation, even though this could be, again, all planned and everything could be all well. them not saying anything or them not mapping it out leaves plenty of room for interpretation. And like we just talked about, they don't deserve the benefit of the doubt anymore for how they handled even just this past year, PR wise. They don't deserve the benefit of the doubt.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's not even like speculation as far as how different it is when they get ahead of it. Last week, Anthony Richardson has nasal surgery. They tell us before practice that he's not going to be out here. He had nasal surgery. He'll be back, as soon as he can. And the hope is the next day. And he's back the next day. And it was nothing. We tweeted out early on, hey, Anthony Richardson's not going to be out here today. He had nasal surgery. He came back the next day. It was done. You controlled that story. This was the exact opposite.
And I don't get the disconnect. And how, like you said, right, like there was no concern. We mentioned it on the podcast. It was not a big deal. We kind of wait and see. And the next day he's out of practice. Okay, everything's well. Imagine they didn't put anything out. All of a sudden you have Anthony Richardson off to the side.
This over again.
What the hell's going on? Is everything okay? And it's just a situation where it makes no sense how it's continually, like, I feel like I'm living in a world of insanity and living out the definition.
It's a Twilight Zone. I mean, it's a Twilight Zone, and it is insanity. But that's, yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, the end product's what matters. And when you do these things coming off a 4-12-1 season, they all look worse. They all feel worse. The Chiefs have a holdout right now with Chris Jones, and it's not nearly this, but they just won the Super Bowl. So it's a little bit different situation. When you're 4-12-1 and this is going on, and you've had the RV situation and you've had all the other nonsense that's already happened, it's going to cast us in a negative light because that's what history tells us to do with it.
That's actually a great point. Think about it. Two of the best players in the league, in Chris Jones of the Chiefs, Nick Bosa of the 49ers, both are holding out, not at camp whatsoever. You know what the 49ers and the Chiefs are not doing? Have their owner roll up in an RV and bring them on board to talk about contract negotiations during practice. Make a big spectacle of, saying things or tweeting things that inflame the other side when it's truly not necessary. Even if it's the truth, just, what's not, George, sometimes just letting it go or sitting one out benefits everyone. They are handling it, even though, again, we are two teams that have done things the right way and two players that are expecting mega deals at positions that are resetting the market at defensive end. They are handling it internally, and they, at least publicly right now, doing everything possible. We have no reason to believe that the 49ers and the Chiefs are like, that the sides are far apart or contentious. They could be, for all we know. Mm-hmm. And both maybe willing to sit out regular season games. But at least right now, perception-wise, they have a handle of the story, and everything is all well. I'm sure in Kansas City and San Francisco, no one's freaking out. The opposite's happened here. And clearly now there's speculation every day. There's news stories coming out left to right. There's Twitter fights. It's ugly. And all, George, could have been avoided. You said before the pod, I could not agree more. We're sick of talking about Jonathan Taylor. Like we want to talk about football. We want to talk about Anthony Richardson's weekend, Shaq Leonard progressing. We on our preview training camp pod, we talked about all the positions and all the position battles that are excited to watch. Defensive back, like defensive end, like there's a lot of guys to watch, George. And we have honestly talked about none of it in part because half the pod every day is taken up about Jonathan Taylor and his future and what's the latest news and is he going to play and is he actually hurt now? And it's frustrating because, again, this is the drama off the field is not good. And again, only makes the Colts look worse, not better. And so another day of leading off with Jonathan Taylor, another day of just uncertainty. And again, the appearance, at least, and as we know, perception is reality, the appearance of the Colts losing control of the situation, and another day of waiting for someone to say something on a team that does not really give a lot of answers. And guess what, George? It's not worked before, and it's not working currently. And here's a hot take. I don't think it's going to work in the future if they stay on this right path.
I agree with you on that one. I think that's probably not going to get any better in situations like these. Now, the one thing that is going well, to shift things a little bit is Shaq Leonard. We talk about a situation that is getting better. He got on the field this weekend. He's in full pads. He's cleared for full contact. He's not doing full practice in the sense that he's not taking every rep that he would normally take. He's still on a pitch count, but he's doing a little bit of everything. And I think the biggest story there was on Sunday, both defense coordinator Gus Bradley and linebackers coach Richard Smith said they saw a spike. They saw a real jump from him in terms of his movement, in terms of his, fluidity on the field, his athleticism coming back. There's still work to do. There's no question. And I think, Richard Smith was very adamant in saying he's not here to say that Shaq Leonard is going to get back to that 3-time All-Pro spot. No one knows that right now. But he does know is he's in a better spot mentally than he's been in, and he's 100% committed to this team, and he's 100% committed to this defense, and that goes a long way. And I think that goes for the quarterback as well. I think they feel like this is a guy who's really locked in, whose work ethic is extraordinary. And that when you add those two things with talent, usually comes out well. So I think the arrow's pointing in the right direction on Shaq, which is good. You were talking about the defensive backs. They're all here now at corner. You've got Darius Rush out there again. You've got Julius Brents out there for the first time. So that's good because that competition's starting to heat up, and maybe we'll get to see all 4 of them in the game on Saturday, which would be a positive step forward. Tyquan Lewis is back in the mix. That's important. He came off pup today. He's out there doing his thing, and apparently, according to Samson Ebukam, bringing a lot of energy and juice to practice, which is kind of Tyquan's thing. But all of those things, like you just said, all of them overshadowed on a daily basis by a food fight with a running back that was at least 75% avoidable.
And I mean, you look at it from an injury perspective, George, you take obviously let's just put Jonathan Taylor to the side and put him in his own category. This has been so far, I'd argue, the best case scenario for the Colts in terms of no serious injuries. I'm excited, especially the best overall player, if you will, and obviously the most important to the defense, it's Shaq Leonard. We had no idea what to expect, right? We had no idea what to expect in the sense that he was not on pup to start training camp, which was huge. He was at practice the first day, again, limited, but they're going to talk about baby steps. And here we are, George, 2.5 weeks into training camp, and he's doing full team 11-on-11 full contact drills with still over a month to go before the season. This is the best case scenario. This is a tremendous, tremendous sign going forward that the maniac is slowly getting his way back to his old form. You're right. He's not going to get on the field in the first 11-on-11 drill and be the 3-time All-Pro we saw and just be the total disruptor at his position that we know he can be. But the fact that right now, again, we're talking about over the weekend, so what is it, August 5th, 6th, 7th? He's back in there kind of getting his feet wet, getting that, that energy back, being in the right space and feeling like himself again. With 1 month to go, George, there's no reason at this point to doubt that we will see Shaq get back to that elite level sooner rather than later. That's a huge sign for this defense and a huge sign again in helping Anthony Richardson, because if the defense is getting turnovers, getting short field for the offense, getting stops, we talked about the pressure put on his shoulders with the Jonathan Taylor situation. That takes a little bit off if your defense, unlike last year, is helping you out and making some plays for you to make your job and your life a little bit easier.
1,000%. I think if Shaq is able just to be out there and be 80% of who he was, it's a huge lift to this defense, which is a young defense and needs a leader like that out there on the field.
Right. So that is, again, a great story, a great development so far going forward that yet again is overshadowed by negative news when it comes to their running back. Let's
self-inflicted wounds.
And they don't listen, George. I don't. Yeah, they do not listen. I don't know what it's going to take to get that drilled through their head eventually, but maybe if they listen to the podcast, we can give free PR advice. Just be honest, get control of the situation. That's like journalism 101.
Yep.
No, it's PR 101, I should say.
It is insane, but that's the world we live in. One more thing because you always ask me before the show, and then I'm not thinking what else do we need to talk about? One more thing that just popped into my head is we're thinking about positives. Alec Pierce doesn't have a lot of catches. He's caught what he's been targeted, but he's not like lighting up camp that way. He's open all the time. And I think Jim Bob Cooter was talking about it yesterday that, when they go back and they look at tape and his route might be on the back end of the play. So it wasn't part of the progression, but they're just, look at this. That was a great route. He is making that year 2 leap in ways that are obvious. His separation right now is ridiculous. He's almost uncoverable out here. So, as we talk about the negatives, because we have to, that's our job. That's what we're here to do. We're going to give it, everything to you, good and bad. Alec Pierce is another one of those things flying under the radar, really looking good. in his second training camp with the Indianapolis Colts.
And obviously that's a massive factor because, again, we talked about before, one of the strong points of Anthony Richardson's game right now, right, is a deep ball. And obviously for the Colts, Alec Pierce is that deep ball threat and someone that you would think would build a strong or need to build a strong connection early on to get Richardson going here and kind of make some plays deep on an offense, especially last year that was horrific at explosive plays and plays over 20 yards. That hopefully is going to change this year. And again, lean into what Anthony Richardson does well. That kind of feels like the one of the tenors of a Shane Steichen offense is lean into what the quarterback you have does well. And the deep ball works well. And like I said, right now, that connection so far is building up steam. Is what? A touchdown. Was it a touchdown each on Saturday and Sunday? You know, I had Pierce had a touchdown on Sunday. They have one Saturday too?
I don't think he did Saturday. He did on Sunday, and it was a deep throw. It was a deep play, and that's what you want to see. Now, granted, it's a young secondary, and so he should be doing this to them, and we'll see how it goes, in the preseason or when the Bears get here or when they're over in Philadelphia, and he's dealing with more veteran defensive players. But it's a really positive step for one of the guys that I think you're looking to make that leap this year.
Absolutely. And one of the guys that's going to be huge in the development of Anthony Richardson, especially in his rookie year. Speaking of which, George, a big weekend for Anthony Richardson. A lot of hype. Hype so loud, George. I heard it all the way in Arizona. There was a big, big weekend for AR in terms of what he did in 11-on-11 drills on Saturday with the 2s, on Sunday with the 1s. Was it 5 combined touchdowns, I think, through the 2 full team sessions over the weekend. What did you see on Saturday that made it so successful, or Saturday and Sunday make it so successful? And then today on Tuesday, we talked about, right, the big thing Richardson this year is going to be consistency. Obviously, Saturday and Sunday, 2 of his best practices, maybe the 2 best practices he's had so far in training camp, was able to take that momentum from Saturday into Tuesday as well.
Well, the first part of that is no, he wasn't. He wasn't bad as he was, though, at the early part of last week. I think the biggest thing last week to me was Tuesday was maybe his worst practice of training camp. And Thursday was a tick better. It was still in the negative side, but moving up. And then Saturday and Sunday, you put back-to-back your 2 best practices together, which is what you want to see. That's the path you want to see with him, that improvement, making those strides and getting there. Today was a little bit rougher. His numbers were not as bad, raw numbers in 11-on-11. He was 4 or 5. The one incompletion was intercepted by Kevin Tolliver, working with the 2s today. But the ball placement wasn't there. There was a pass interference that would have been an incompletion that, the flag kind of saved him. The ball was late. It needed to be out earlier. He probably needed, if he throws that ball a little bit deeper, which he's more than capable of, it might be a touchdown. So even the fact that it's a flag, in a game, you're going to take it because you're going to get a first down, down like the 15-yard line, but it's not ideal. He was off target a little bit in the 7-on-7 today, which we've seen in the past from him. That's one thing that's unique with him. He tends to struggle more in 7-on-7 than he does in 11-on-11. And I wonder if that is thinking too much, because you don't have the defensive line and you do have time. And I think when he's in rhythm and he's out there and he's just playing, he's doing better right now. I think when he starts analysis, paralysis by analysis sometimes in 7-on-7, not that, it's still this, none of this is to say that, it's the end of the world. He's a rookie. You're going to have these things happen. I think probably the moment he probably wants back the most today, they did a 4-minute drill at the end of the day and you're trying to run the clock out. And he did a scramble and he wasn't touched. He went to the ground and he fumbled. The defense got it and got off the field. And that's a part of his game that's going to be really important. And it's not, again, that's not the end of the world, but it's just kind of playing into today was not his best day. But that being said, this weekend was everything you hope to see from him. And a lot of that was him just being more comfortable back there. You could just see him, his command of the offense, his command of the playbook was there. Some of the throws that he made on Saturday and Sunday were just ridiculous in terms of, throwing off his back foot and throwing it like 25 yards on a dime to somebody. Those are things that you can't teach, that he just has that not many people on earth are able to do. 9 of 11 on Saturday, and the 2 incompletions, one was 1,000% on Mike Strong. Shane Steichen was running down the sideline yelling at him after the play. He just didn't look back for the ball. It was miscommunication. Richardson threw it in rhythm, and Strawn never knew it was coming, and the ball just went out of the sideline, and was incompletion. The other one was a deep ball that the receiver went to the ground for and didn't come up with, which is going to happen. You're going to live with that. I mean, you're 9-11, and those are your 2 incompletions, and a lot of your 9 completions were, big time throws. I know he had a touchdown through Ogletree on a really nice pass over the middle in that. And then on Sunday, he came back. He had the deep ball to Pierce. He had a 2-minute drill. It was really a 46-second drill. They had the ball at their own 25-yard line, no timeouts, down 8. They had to score and get a 2-point conversion. And I think the third play, he throws about a 15-yard touchdown pass to Kylan Granson that was beautiful. It was everything you want to see. And then he runs in the 2-point conversion himself. So, won that drill. They looked really good. Now I think Tuesday was a step backwards. It's still above where he was last week when he was down. But I think what's interesting with him is when he has a good practice or a bad practice, you always want to see how the next day goes. And what you're seeing from him so far in training camp is he's bouncing back well, and he's improving, and he's growing every day. And that's what more can you ask for?
And the thing that I like a lot, I saw Zaire Franklin say, and that's going to be huge this year, is how much more comfortable and in control he is of the offense. Because look, it's very simple, but it's also very true. Like, once you understand the offense, everything slows down. Once you know what the defense is doing, the entire game just kind of comes to you. And when things are now slowing down, you truly are able to unleash the full potential of Anthony Richardson's athletic ability. The one thing that's going to slow him down, the one thing that's going to be the biggest hindrance is his brain. Like you said, like, it's paralysis by analysis, being undecisive or uncertain of what coverage they're in, where to go with the ball, how to adjust the play call. Am I comfortable in this read? Am I truly sure it's this? When you have the indecision, it truly hurts his ability to be a playmaker, either with his arm or with his legs, if you're constantly second guessing yourself and not feeling truly comfortable in what the defense is doing and what the play call is asking you to do as well from both sides of the ball. And so to hear, Zaire talk about from a defensive perspective, how much more comfortable he thinks and Anthony Richardson looks, like I said, bad plays are going to happen. We talked about it. We said the word consistency a million times. We'll say it a million times more, George, going forward. That's going to be the biggest thing from the season. But one of the ways to help make that consistency more of a trend going forward here, and obviously being consistently good, is getting comfortable, knowing the offense in and out, and allowing the game to come to you. And that's when I think we'll see Richardson truly be at his best. It's going to be a long process, but at least early on, you hear about Richardson's work ethic. You hear about him constantly studying the playbook. And now you're starting to see tangibly small results of that, where you truly start to see the more comfortable, the more he's able to grasp. Now, all of a sudden, the freer he's playing and the more confident that his game is.
Yeah, it definitely starts to pay off. And I think the thing with him, it isn't so much knowing the offense or, knowing where to go with the ball. I think he's an extremely smart football kid. Everything I've heard from him, both when we talk to him, when we talk to the other guys on the team, when you talk to the coaches, is that he processes information so quickly, and he gets it. He's picking up the offense. I think for him, it's more getting into your mind about fundamentals instead of playing. I think at times he's back there, and because like I said, he's struggling more in 7-on-7 than he is in 11-on-11, which to me, I think it's more about him having that time to worry about, okay, where's my step here? Or, what arm angle am I going to use? I think when he just goes out there and plays and is free and lets it out, you see him play on his instincts, play on his intelligence, use his athleticism, use his incredible God-given gifts. Then he's pretty hard to stop. But I think when he starts getting into his head and starts thinking about, okay, this many step drop and, put my foot here and do, I think that's when he gets into trouble.
And I'm really excited to see how that transits over on Saturday when the Colts do play their first preseason game. We'll talk more on Thursday's podcast about, hopefully by that point, we'll figure out who's the starter and how many reps Richardson will get in that game against Buffalo. But really excited to kind of see for the first time him play against a different opponent. And if that changes, like I said, his footwork, we'll try to see how comfortable he is in his first professional action on Sunday, or on Saturday in Buffalo. Before we wrap up here, George, one of the biggest areas going into this team going into this season that's a question mark for this team is offensive line. We've not talked a lot about the offensive line, in part because they're not doing a lot, right? Most of the practices so far have been in lower pad or upper pads or t-shirts and helmets. You're not doing a lot. even full pads. There's not a lot of live periods. But you had I thought a really good feature, George, this week about Tony Sparano Jr. and his first chance at being a full-time offensive line coach and how he's rallying with the guys and how he's coaching so far. We'll truly, hopefully, see a lot of those guys playing on Saturday in Buffalo, but if not, we'll see it, I'm sure, in the joint practices next week against the Bears. So we should be able to see sooner rather than later the early fruits, hopefully, of Tony Sparano Jr.'s labor. But at least early on, George, how are the offensive line, how are they gelling with the new coach? What have you seen from Tony Sparano Jr. that maybe is a little different than past years? Like how are the guys right now so far reacting to their new O-line coach?
They love him. They absolutely love him. And I think one of the things, there's a lot made in the offseason about Shane hired him, but they didn't have a history together. There wasn't, Tony wasn't with him with the Chargers or the Eagles. And that's usually the way this goes. And you're just thinking, well, what is it about these two? And I think what you realize talking to both of them is they're both so detail oriented. They're both down to the last period in the sentence, looking things up. And one of the big things that Quentin Nelson was talking about the other day was Sparano's texting him at all hours of the night. They've had meetings all day, and then he's getting these texts. And Sparano said, yeah, I'm 100% guilty of that, but I'll see something. And I want to let that guy know it right now in the moment. We might not get it to it in the meeting the next day. There might not be time. And I've seen it now. And so I want to get it out there right now because this might help this player. And so he's texting these guys, sending them video, with voiceovers or just a little text and saying, hey, I saw this on this play. What do you think? We could do this way. We could do whatever. I think that level of detail, it adds accountability to everything you do. Because when you're going that deep and you're watching every step you take, and he's being honest by all accounts in the meeting rooms and in the film room, it adds that everybody takes a little more pride in what they're doing then. Because if your coach is that detail oriented, you're going to be that detail oriented. And I think it's just the number one thing with the offensive line. And this is not, I'm not breaking news here. I'm not shocking anybody. Is that chemistry. You hear from Sparano almost every time he talks to us, 5 is 1. That's his big thing. 5 is 1. And I think you need that level of detail to get there. You got to know what everybody else is doing. You got to know where they're going to be. And that means being very precise in everything you do. And how's that going to translate to the field? We'll see. Jim Bob Cooter seems to be a pretty straight shooter. He seems like a guy who kind of tells it like it is, when we've had him so far. And he said, they've won some, they've lost some up front in these full padded practices. But he also said that he's seen a couple times that little push up front, that little double team from the guard in the center that you need that opens that lane and gives that running back that two-way, choice when he comes to the hole and leads to these big plays. So I think they're feeling like things are heading the right way. Now, obviously that could change. You could get up to Buffalo and not be able to run the ball and feel differently. Or get into the joint practices with Chicago, not be able to break anything and feel differently. But right now, as we sit here August 8th, I think they feel like things are heading in the right direction. And I think a lot of that goes to an offensive line coach who's just not going to let anything slide.
2 words you said that I think are huge. Like you said, it's early on and we will not see anything until Buffalo, but really even not until Jacksonville week number 1. So it all is just good word speak for now. We got to see it in action, obviously, once the games do start. But 2 words you said that I thought really were lost last year, and that was chemistry and accountability. You talked about 5 as 1. Last year, George, how many times we watched the offensive line that felt like there was 5 playing as 5? Everyone's doing different things. No one's 100% sure about who's getting where. How many blown assignments did we see where free rushers coming off the edge in the interior that gave whoever is quarterbacking no chance to make some sort of play or give no hole for Jonathan Taylor to run through? There was a lot of miscommunication. That was a word talked about a lot last year that was never fixed. And that goes to the second word you said, accountability. And it felt like at times no one was taking ownership of the horrendous offensive line play. And then nothing speaks larger to that than the Giants game where you have Kayvon Thibodeau doing the snow angels. Nick Foles is dead on the ground and no one does anything. How
did you let that happen in your backyard, by the way? How did you let that happen in your backyard?
You know why? I was on a plane to the Rose Bowl. That's why, George. They knew I was not in the building. And so they thought, we can get away with it. No problem. Ryan won't be there to hold us accountable and won't be yelling from the upper deck. That's the only reason why. So you're welcome to all 5 guys, because Quentin Nelson, I'm sure if he saw me in person, he would be very afraid. I am physically imposing, especially to a guy like Quentin Nelson size. That's for sure. So he was lucky that day. He was lucky. But that's all you need, George. That was the epitome of the entire season. One play summed up the entire issue for that line last year. So to hear those 2 words being kind of the focus for this year, accountability and chemistry, after last year wasn't, again, the Colts, I think, are taking a risk by banking on that it was more coaching last year than talent. And so far, at least it's good to hear that those 2 areas are the focus, because those are the 2 areas severely lacking last year. So hopefully Ballard is right in the sense that he identified what truly was wrong, and they found a guy in Tony Sparano Jr. that is able to, at least again, right now, focus on those 2 wrongs to try to make them rights.
I also know that he's smarter than Sean Payton, because he would not touch any question about what went wrong last year. He just said, I wasn't here last year, and I'm not going to talk about that. I don't know how they were coached. I don't know what they were seeing. I don't know what was going on. And I frankly don't care. It's not about last year. It's about what we do from this point forward. And I just thought, okay, smarter than the Broncos head coach.
He didn't say that Chris Strausser's job last year is one of the worst coaching jobs he's ever seen.
He did not say that.
Wow.
And he probably could say that in Indianapolis and not get a lot of pushback. But
I was going to say,
who's
saying he's wrong?
He is intelligent enough to know not to say that. And he just avoided that question altogether. And I will say this, Sparano's a very likable guy. He is like central casting for offensive line coach. I mean, he's exactly what you think you're getting from that mentality, and from, he likes to poke fun at himself a lot. Like, he's like, just look at me. I'm not a quarterback guy. I'm not going to be out there coaching the quarterbacks, but I think that helps, because I think in a way, I think the offensive linemen, it's a family, right? I mean, among all the groups, especially here, they eat together, they go out together. They're together almost all the time. And I think Sparano's able to fit into that. I think he's one of the guys in the ways that matter, but also, being able to hold them accountable, and being able to point out what needs to be done. So how does that all work out? Who knows? Good approaches from the coach get you about halfway there. You still need to execute on the field. That's ultimately how this is going to be judged. And Sparano's not going to be judged by what players said about him in August. He's going to be judged by, yards per carry and sacks and all those things that last year were nowhere near where they need to be.
No, that is for sure. And again, we talked about numerous times already how important the offensive line play is going to be for Anthony Richardson's development. And again, the Jonathan Taylor situation is not helping, only adding more pressure. But two things that can help alleviate that: the play of Alec Pierce, which so far, again, that connection seems to be blossoming, and it looks early on that Alec Pierce could be in line for a big year 2 breakout. And the offensive line, the 5 guys in front of him, playing as one, giving him time to go through his reads, giving him time and holes to open up if he does run the ball, and make his life a whole hell of a lot easier than Matt Ryan had it, than Nick Foles had it, and then and Sam Ehlinger had it last year. So we'll get our first taste in Buffalo. Thursday's pod is going to be, because the Colts are off on Wednesday, Thursday's pod is going to be a lot about the preseason game number 1 preview. How much will Anthony Richardson play? Hopefully, George. I mean, I'm hoping we get some sort of answers of who's going to be the starters, who's going to play, who's not going to play after Thursday's practice is over. But also, if there's any indication so far of how Shane Steichen has run things, I would not expect that.
He did say we can get quarterback answers later in the week, so it doesn't get later than Thursday. So we'll see.
Maybe we'll see
how that goes.
Will you overreact to who is the starter on Saturday?
I won't, but I guarantee you that the social media world will.
I guarantee you'll hear a collective groan from everyone across the state of Indiana if you hear Shane Steichen say Gardner Minshew will be QB1 to start the season, or start the preseason in Buffalo.
Absolutely. And I do think it's interesting, because I think there's a case to be made that Richardson needs not just time with his own ones, because he really hasn't had a ton of it. They're splitting reps out here. They split reps in the spring. Some of those guys were out, as we mentioned, didn't practice in the spring. So not only does he need reps with his own ones, but I think he needs to go against the first team defense too. I don't know if he's getting as much Even out here, I don't know if he's getting as much the days he goes against the twos. I don't know if he'll get as much going against the Buffalo Steelers. Now, if it's like last year, Buffalo didn't play their ones. So, there may be no reps against the ones to be had, but I do think he's going to get more out of like the joint practices with the Bears and the Eagles than he is probably most of these preseason games anyway. So I think we got to take that into account as well.
I think you're right about that. And obviously, I think especially for this preseason game, we'll talk about this more on Thursday's pod, but I think reps are going to be more important, especially for Saturday compared to even who he's running with. Because you're right. There's going to be no Von Miller. That's for sure. Bills have a loaded secondary. A lot of those guys, none of those guys played last year. So a lot of standout defensive players for Buffalo that probably, especially in preseason game number 1, do not need the extra reps. So probably will be in jerseys and shorts when we do kick off 1:00 in Buffalo on Saturday. So, George, I think we should end the pod now before another Jonathan Taylor story breaks. And we're here for another hour talking about the latest drama and his whereabouts.
Phone just buzzed.
Uh-oh. Do we have any last minute before the buzzer breaking news? Jonathan Taylor is I don't know. No, okay. We are clear. So we'll end the pod now before something breaks. I'm sure between now and Thursday, another big story will happen. So we are not scheduled because the Colts are off Wednesday to have a pod on Wednesday. Instead, we'll be back after Thursday's practice as a big preseason game number 1 preview. And I'm sure we'll have playing time set and the quarterback and the starter set as well. So we'll kind of get, ready for that, that game as well. So between now and then, try to enjoy yourself, have some sanity. Do not allow Jonathan Taylor saga to bring you down too much, and have a great next few days. We'll talk to you, George, on Thursday right here on the Blue Horseshoe Pod.